When she asked me to do something about 2 years ago, I said, I want to be incognito in this place. I don't want anybody to know me. I don't want to get to know anybody. I just want to hide. But I so believe in what we're talking about, and I so believe that we raise consciousness in our community by raising our own consciousness, that I'm just delighted to be a part. And I truly do believe that you are the wisdom keepers. And so all I'm doing is adding more wisdom to your wisdom. I am not here to be the super wise one. I'm here just to add wisdom to your wisdom. So I call you the wisdom keepers, and I'm really glad you're here. Kathy sat right here, and I joked with her before because she was willing to be the therapy client at the beginning of the last session. And somebody commented it felt like a therapy group, but this will not be a therapy group, I promise. We've heard the phrase, it takes a village, and that's some of the value of our gathering together to talk about these topics, because it does take a village for us to be a conscious community. We can be an unconscious community. We can choose to be totally unconscious and not involved or know about or be growing, or we can make the choice that we want to be conscious. And by being conscious, that means we're expanding ourselves. And I'm just offering my small bit of more consciousness to you from my own experience and what I know and what I learned. So I'm just really glad, because nothing makes any sense in doing this unless you're here. I could stand up here and talk to myself, but the fact that you're here, you add so much. So thank you for coming. We're going to start with something we did last time, and that has to do with a self-scan. Do you remember when we did the self-scan last time? Some of you liked it, some of you didn't, but we're going to do it anyway, because I think it's really important. And when I meet with people or have met with people, I have found that they find it useful when they take it home. So I just want you to imagine that you have a piece of paper in front of you with a pen, and that you write PEMS on the side of the paper. And then you get quiet, and we're going to do that. And then you just respond on the paper, if you have the paper, how you feel like you're doing physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And sometimes people just like to write down a number between 0 and 10. 10 being the highest, 0 being the lowest. So what I want to do, it took a lot of effort for you to get here, to decide what to wear, to decide what you were going to eat, to decide if you were even coming, decide whether you were going to drive your car or not. So now I want you to just have time to be quiet. So I'm asking you to put your feet on the floor, flat on the floor, and I'm asking that you close your eyes if you feel comfortable. If not, you don't have to. But I'm going to ask you to do a self-scan. So be quiet with yourself and be aware of your breathing. And the goal here is to make the breath not a frantic breath, but a relaxed breath. So it may take a couple of times for you to do that breath because you had to walk here or go upstairs or not sure whether you wanted to come. So let's get the frantic breath taken care of and just give your body an affirmation with your breath that you are comfortable in your chair, you're comfortable being who you're sitting next to, you're glad you made the decision to be here, and just take a cleansing breath. And then I'd like for you for a moment to let your body speak to you and tell you how it is. And then you've had emotions today, this week, this month. Try to get a sense of what your dominant emotions have been for the last several days. And then get a sense of what your dominant thoughts have been the last couple of days? What have been your dominant thoughts? Have they been critical? Have they been positive? Have they been worried? Get a sense of what your thoughts have been the last couple of days. And then finally, what is the state of your soul? What is the state of your soul? And then take one more cleansing breath. And then slowly open your eyes. As I suggested last time, this would be a very positive mental health activity every day, to just give a scan of yourself, to know what you feel physically, what you've been feeling, what you've been thinking, and then to ground that with the state of your soul. So thank you for doing that together. Allison, could we have some more air conditioning? Do you know how to work it? It's so hot in here. Maybe I'm the only one because I'm working, I don't know. So I had a friend who said, we just needed to talk more about the brain last time. So because of him, you can know we're going to talk more about the brain this time. And I want to read something to you. There's a wonderful book. It's called This Is Your Brain on Music. And it's an amazing study of what happens when we listen to or participate in making music and how the brain changes. And I'm going to read a portion, just one paragraph, but I'm going to read it twice because I want you to understand what it's saying. When we did that exercise just now, neurons, N-E-U-R-O-N-S, and I promise I won't spell every word of the brain that we're going to talk about, neurons were firing, keeping your thoughts going, keeping you upright, keeping you awake. Constantly, neurons were firing. And I want you to have a sense of how many neurons are in your body. So let me read you this paragraph. It is difficult to appreciate the complexity of the brain because the numbers are so huge and they go well beyond our everyday experience. The average brain consists of 100 million neurons. Suppose each neuron was $1, and you stood on a street corner trying to give dollars away to people as they passed by, as fast as you could hand them out. Let's just say $1 per second. If you did this 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, without stopping, and if you started on the day that Jesus was born, you would be by the present day only having gone through 2/3 of your money. Even if you gave away $100 bills once a second, it would take you 32 years to pass them all out. That's a lot of neurons. The real power and the complexity of the brain and of thought come through the connections of the neurons. Now, because that was such a great statement, I'm going to read it one more time, okay? Okay, this is the statement. It is difficult to appreciate the complexity of the brain because the numbers are so huge, they go well beyond our everyday experience. The average brain consists of 100 billion neurons. Suppose each neuron was $1 and you stood on the street corner trying to give dollars away to people as they passed by, as fast as you could hand them out. Let's just say $1 a second. If you did this for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year without stopping, and if you started on the day that Jesus was born, you would, by the present day, only have gone through about 2/3 of your money. Even if you gave away $100 bills once a second, it would take you 32 years to pass them all out. This is a lot of neurons, but the real power and complexity of the brain and of thought come through the connections of the neurons. So what's the big deal about that? It's pretty fascinating, actually. But I'm trying to point out that we have a lot working in our favor, so that if a neuron or two is damaged for some reason, there are thousands that can take its place, as long as we are taking good care of ourselves. So it's really important that you just understand the basic ingredient of the brain. We have had scientific achievements in the last years due to all the machines that have been developed to help us understand the brain, that one of the things I want to do is to make sure that you know a few things about modern self-care based on what we have learned in science about the brain. And one of the reasons I want to tell you about this is because there's a possibility that one of your children or grandchildren could have gone to a doctor for depression or anxiety, may have gone to a psychiatrist to get some medication, and they might have said to you some things that you had never heard about before, and you became a skeptic. And you were afraid for your child or your child or your grandchild that they may be getting into woo-woo places. Well, I'm grateful to tell you that 2 of us in this room are pretty woo-woo, so we're going to be talking about things because it's now current scientific information, okay? So, has anybody heard of the vagus nerve? Okay, great. The vagus nerve has been recently, I would say in the last 20 years or less, found, and it runs from the brain all the way down to the belly. The vagus nerve has so much power and so much influence on our body. And it's considered the superhighway between the brain and the rest of the body. And specifically the stomach. We are now learning about the microbiome. How many people have heard about the microbiome? Okay, so glad. The microbiome is that which is found in the belly that is useful to us in processing and making energy happen in the context of the body. And what we eat affects the microbiome. So, what does that mean? That means that kefir and kombucha and sauerkraut are really good for the microbiome. We will be discovering other things over the years, but those foods are really, really good for cleansing of the belly. Because surprisingly or not, a lot of our emotions are affected by what happens with the neurons in the body as the vagus nerve is involved with the belly. And we have the responsibility of trying to make good decisions about what we eat that can be oriented around supporting the microbiome. That's as much about that I'm going to talk about because I know you're already bored. Neuroplasticity is another word. Does anybody know what neuroplasticity is? Okay. Beatty, tell us what neuroplasticity is.
Well, the ability of the whole body, and particularly the mind, to go from one damaged area and create new
synapses of the neurons, yes. We have an tremendous capacity because of what a word, it's called neuroplasticity, that helps us to bounce back in another way. And I'm sure if I took time to ask you all, you have a friend or a family member who had something happen and then they compensated for it in another way in their body to make up for what they lost in a section of their body. That's the neuroplasticity of the neurons and the way the body's made. We have just recently, like when I was a nurse 5,000 years ago, we didn't know about neuroplasticity. We didn't know about the vagus nerve. We were functioning with our one hand behind our back. As we are open to new scientific research, and scientific research is financially supported, we learn more and more about the brain. Yes, Donna?
I want to ask you if this is possible. My dad had horrible ulcers. He was a salesman under a lot of stress on the road.
Bill,
Anyway, the ulcers, he would stand up and take soda. And I said, Dad, are you hurting? Yes, don't ask anymore. So he had ulcers, he hurt a lot. And he went to see some doctor, and he came home and he said, I have no pain. I don't know if this was the way it was explained. He said they clipped my vagus nerve. And he never had a pain from that any other time. Whatever they did, they told him he clipped it. I don't know. Cut it, whatever.
Well, I doubt if they clipped the whole
Yeah, that's what I
vagus
was
nerve.
just thinking, yeah.
But there may have been some kind of a portion that they anesthetized.
Whatever, it
And you
healed
know,
him.
how old was your dad then? How many years ago was that?
Oh, gosh, 20 years more.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right.
long time.
All right, so we're
than 20.
We're learning. Okay, great. Serotonin, does anybody know serotonin? Serotonin makes us feel better. Serotonin makes us feel better. And if we see a doctor for depression or anxiety or some of the mental health issues, the goal is to deal with the serotonin and have the serotonin regulated, okay? Dopamine is also a chemical in the brain that lifts our mood. So the drugs that we take hopefully are working in tandem with the chemicals in our body that improve how our body feels, with the dopamine and with the serotonin. So I want to go through a list of what I think your brain needs. And in the context of what I think your brain needs, you're going to say to me, okay, I'm going to watch her for the rest of her life while I'm here because I'm going to see if she keeps doing these things that she's recommending, right? You have the right, being I've taken this position, to always tell me, you talked about that, but you're not doing it. You may do that. That's the trouble you get into when you do one of these. Okay, so the brain has to have hydration. Hydration. We need to be drinking a lot. And one of the things I recommend is that you have your water bottle by your toilet in the morning so that the first time you go in the bathroom and you urinate, you drink that bottle of water so that you are beginning your day with water. Because caffeine dehydrates. So that if you take water at that first sit in the bathroom, you have gone into your coffee or your tea or whatever hydrated because you dehydrated during the night. So I recommend that we have ways of working on dehydration because so many of us in our aging get UTIs, urinary tract infections. That is not the only thing that causes a urinary tract infection, so just know that. You get urinary tract infections for other reasons, but staying hydrated is one of the things that we can do about that. The brain needs healthy energy. That's from protein and nutrients from food. We use carbs and we use sugar to give us energy. Those do not help our body. That does not help the microbiome in the belly, in the digestion process. Sugar or carbs don't help us stay healthy. One of the issues about sugar is, this isn't any news to you, sugar craves sugar, craves sugar, craves sugar. But if we can go 4 days detoxed from sugar, drinking lots of water and eating really good foods, we can break that sugar addiction. Sugar is easily an addiction for all of us. And for those of us who are genetically loaded for addiction, sugar becomes the enemy for you. So keep in mind that our microbiome needs a healthy gut to help the vagus nerve function going up to the brain. Okay, the brain needs power surges. And that happens through a variety of ways, and one is through exercise. The brain, in those power surges, we make decisions about some of the things we're coping with, and it's important to know that we can do things for things like osteoarthritis or osteoporosis. So lubrication helps with osteoarthritis. Lubrication, movement, stretching. Maybe we can't get rid of the condition, but we can figure out how to lubricate more our joints. And then, speaking from experience, osteoporosis. One of the things that the person that guides me in some of this stuff has encouraged me, and I've now been doing this for over a year. I have 2 brooms underneath the dining room table, which maybe you've noticed if you've come to visit. I have 2 towels and 2 brooms. I have a broom for the right hand and a broom for the left hand, and I have a towel on the floor here because we have wooden floors and I don't want to dent them, and I have a towel over here. And then he recommends that I just pound those brooms 200 times in the morning and at night. And what I'm doing is I'm creating friction and strengthening my bones. It's not complicated. It's not complicated. And it increases the bone mass, which is our goal. We also have to be noticing, if we do have osteoporosis, that calcium is better taken at certain times of the day, and we have a pharmacist here that could answer these questions, than during other times of the day where we're eating or not eating, or drinking coffee or not drinking coffee. We need to be taking our supplements like calcium at good times of the day. And he's sitting back here with a red shirt, and you can talk to him afterwards.
What are the towels for?
The towels are just for me not to put a wedge in our wooden floors. Right? Okay.
But he said doing I've heard stomping. Stomping also, like heel stomps.
Right. I have a bad foot, so I can't do that.
And,
So
and
I
that
do
might not be
that.
good for somebody who has fractures and stuff.
Right.
He
Right.
said calcium is better taken at a certain time of day.
Can you say when it's best to take calcium?
Usually with a meal, after a meal, like for absorption. Most of your vitamins are best taken with meals. That way you get
With what?
absorbing the
Meals.
and drinking the meal. That way you're consuming the vitamins from the meal itself, nutrition wise, but then they're absorbed with it much easier on the body, to be perfectly honest.
So the answer was calcium is best absorbed with your meal, so that the absorption of the food is helping with the absorption of the calcium. But I've also understood that it's not really good to take our supplements too close to having had coffee.
Right.
Is that right? Am I right on that?
Yeah, sometimes it varies from person to person.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I've given you some ideas on the power surges. The brain needs interaction. That's why I'm so glad you're here. That's one of the reasons. A Gallup poll recently conducted on loneliness discovered that 1/4 of the population of our country is lonely. Now, that may have been done during COVID, and I think probably the scores were up during COVID. Lonely was very much a part of the pattern here, isolation and all of that, and it contributed to much illness. So the whole idea is we're not made to be isolated. We're made to be interacting. That's the way now some of us are introverts, some of us are extroverts. Some of us who are introverts get really sick of extroverts. Some extroverts here can't believe that other introverts don't talk enough. They don't want to sit with them at the dining table because they never talk. But it's participating in experiences like this that we as a community are promoting social health. We're promoting social health. You may want to argue with this, and I'd be very interested in hearing your comments on this, but on this poll, they concluded that women find it easier to form alliances and men retreat. Is that, in your experience, accurate? Women form alliances and men retreat when they're lonely. Right? Okay. So I just want to put a star here. I just love the fact that we received at least 12, maybe more, limericks written by the men that meet for breakfast on Monday mornings. Those limericks shocked me that those men got together and had breakfast and decided to write limericks, and they were so good. They were so good. They need to be published somewhere. We can't let those go. They're so good. From not getting their coffee, not whatever, to the picking up poop, whatever that was about. So that was Paul's. That was so good to see that we have a group of men, needs more probably, to get together and do limericks and do whatever other thing they do for breakfast on Monday mornings. Really a fun time, it sounds like. Women do other things. We go over there into the sewing room and make things. Okay. There are plenty, in my opinion, almost too many opportunities to be together. I have to go through the calendar and scratch off, because I'm an introvert, so believe it or not. And so I can't do everything that everybody else does. But there's no excuse for not having associations here, for not having a friend. Okay. This doesn't surprise you. The brain needs stimulation. The brain needs stimulation. A certain kind of stimulation. Too much TV causes the brain to become sluggish. Too much TV causes the brain to become sluggish. Some people have the habit of turning the TV on in the morning and turning it off at night, because there's something about hearing it happening. You want to be the first one to know that XYZ happened today, or it's just nice to have something in the background, or if you're by yourself, it may make you feel better regarding loneliness. It doesn't help you though, because it's denying you the opportunity to go inside yourself and reflect on what your thoughts are, what your ideas are, how you're feeling about life. It's escaping if the television's going all the time. Yeah.
Music going all the time.
I think we have other people probably that could speak to that as well, and maybe you can read this book and tell me the answer to it. Music going all the time, I don't think is the same as watching preparations for the debate on Thursday night, or something's going on in Ukraine, or they just discovered that XYZ is in bread and we can't eat that, or sometimes the soap operas are so depressing. But there are some, like Masterpiece Theater and that kind of thing, it's a whole different thing. If we don't give our, and so I'm not really answering your question, I think music for some people, it doesn't for me, definitely for my husband. Music calms people down. Music makes me irritated. I like doing things in silence more than I like listening to music, but everybody's different. You have to find your own way. But if you find yourself agitated or grinding your teeth while the music's on, turn it off. Your body's giving you the message, I don't want this. I do not want this. There's another part here. The circadian rhythms in our brain help us to dream. Dreaming is a very important part of our sleep. And if we're medicating a great deal to sleep, we're missing soul conversation. I think the only way I survived 45 years in mental health is because I found the work of Carl Jung. Has anybody heard the work of Carl Jung? J-U-N-G. All right. That fed me. Mental health work is not easy work. I'm not saying that other medical work, but mental health work is not easy work. And Carl Jung brought soul and spiritual formation into analysis. And that's what kept me going. And I met with people, I took classes just for my own feeding in order to do good work. I needed to feed myself. I didn't need to go to any more cognitive behavioral classes on how to help a person understand what they're thinking. I had enough of that in certification. But I love understanding dreams. I understand understanding symbols, because the dreams are the language of the soul. So if we can use them to speak to us and maybe scare us, but work them through to understand what they're meaning, we are knowing more about ourselves. And that's my goal for myself, is to know about myself as much as I can know before, and then I'm going to know something else about myself on the other side. So dream groups are another new emerging treatment where people get together, just like you have a creative writing group, you do dream groups, and you bring your dreams and you talk about your dreams. And I've had a dream like that myself. What do you think that means? And talking about what's happening in your dreams. It's not just a passing chemical blip that you're having some night when you have a dream. Dreams mean something. And I encourage you to get a dream book and look at some of the symbols. It just really feeds me. All right. I think you can get the message that I feel like deeper soul work is going to help us make this aging into the next life so much better. And next session, I want to talk about the fact that I think, for me, and maybe for you, that our managing our anxiety about how we're going to die, who we're going to die with, where we're going to be, is anybody going to find me, am I going to linger on, will I not be with my family, will my husband go first, all those questions. We all, let's be honest, we all have those questions. And those questions fuel anxiety. And it's a really important piece of work for us to be doing the work. Everybody in here would probably say, I'm not afraid to be dead. It's the dying that I'm uptight about, because I want to know what it's going to be like. I want to plan for it. We want a sense of control of our lives. Have you gotten that? Has anybody felt that way? We are people that want a sense of control. I don't know that many people have talked about the fact that we benefit from bringing out into the open our level of anxiety about dying. At this stage of the game, not when we're over in the nursing home and can hardly think anymore. Now, it creates anxiety for us. Okay, the brain sometimes needs supplementation. And what does that mean? Well, we referred to it earlier. Sometimes you're going to need to take prescribed medication. And this morning I was at Carpenter's home visiting someone that I visit for church, and his daughter was there, and she explained to me that none of the children live in town. And he became belligerent. He became impossible. He became physically difficult with the staff. And nobody had told the family that the doctor changed the medication. And that's what we need to be observing for, is when we have situations where we are needing advocates for our own health as we make this slow transition, to be aware of how medications are affecting us. And supplements also. You know, we were discussing calcium. One of the important parts about the supplementation is either with meds or with vitamins or whatever, is particularly with meds. And I'm talking about psychotropic meds, you know, depression, anxiety, those kinds. You've got to give them a chance to work. Somebody will try a med for 4 days and say, it's not, I'm itching, or I'm tapping my foot, or I have a headache. The body is trying to reject that medication because it's a foreign substance. It doesn't recognize it. And the body needs time accommodating to that new medication. So it's important to give it time for the body to know it. And gradually, in most cases, the medications will gradually be taken in by the body and used well. Granted, it doesn't happen with all. The brain needs activation, and the brain needs deactivation. We get super activated watching the news. We get super activated watching the news. We want to stay informed, but we have to trust in our own, whatever our choices are, we have to trust what we're listening to. Because we get overly reactive. Our body begins to hold the stress of what we're listening to. We have to find responsible news feeds. Ones that seem to you to be providing you with the truth. We need to allow people to have their own opinions. That doesn't mean we need to spend time with them if it's so far from our own opinion, because that is agitating for us as well. But we need the stimulation of thought. And the brain needs calming. The vagus nerve that I was talking about interacts with the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous systems in the brain. Does anybody recognize from school those two words, parasympathetic and sympathetic? You remember that at all? Okay. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic influence the limbic system, which is in the brain, connected to the amygdala, and it causes that freeze, fight, and flight. Those three. That's the sympathetic nervous system. We need that. And we need to be able to quickly do something. That's the sympathetic. But we can't be quickly doing something all the time because we're wearing our body out. So the parasympathetic is what we work with to try to calm the body down. Especially, and we all hear this, someone who's needed to be taken to the hospital on the ambulance and gets really stressed and very fearful. Well, they're in that sympathetic nervous system response. And they need somebody who meets up with them. We've got it now. You're safe. We've got it. Just calm down, take a deep breath. You see these machines? They're meant for you. We're here to help you. We know what we're doing. Take a deep breath. We've got to get back the parasympathetic to a place of calming after we have been revved up for one reason or another. The news will do that. Sometimes our in-laws will do that. Do we have in-laws? Are we too old? Oh, yeah, my in-laws are gone. I don't have in-laws anymore. My child will do that for sure. So we have to figure out ways of making our bodies as relaxed as possible most of the time. That is super hard work. Those systems kick in that vagus nerve that goes to the brain and gives the brain the message that we are either safe or we're not safe. And if we don't feel safe, we will freeze, we will fight, or we will flee. And we can do that with our thoughts. We learned so much about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system treating Vietnam vets. I don't think I was working then. It feels like no, I wasn't working then. What we've learned from treating Vietnam vets, they were treated in therapeutic situations. Talk about what happened. Talk about it. Just tell us what happened. It'll help you if you just talk about it. Where were you? How many people died? Just talk about it. That has proven to not help. Because what you're doing is you're re-traumatizing the person and kicking in the sympathetic nervous system and causing the person to relive whatever it was that they're discussing that happened in Vietnam. It took us doing that for many years in VA treatment to learn it was a mistake. It was a big mistake. So now what's happening is relaxation, meditation, music, art, dancing, to slow it down, not build it up. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. So let me just repeat that the sympathetic nervous system gets activated, which causes a person to live in a constant state of anxiety or fear. Constant high-functioning sympathetic nervous system can age us. The glucose in the body rises. The immune system goes into overdrive and burns out. Digestion slows down, and blood to the muscles diminishes. The parasympathetic, the calming part of our body, of our brain, can save us if we practice self-soothing behaviors. Some of you self-soothe by cooking. Some of you do not self-soothe by cooking. The parasympathetic is functioning when you're cooking, or the sympathetic is angrily functioning when you're cooking, okay? There are choices you make that either turn that on or turn that off. Okay, so what is self-soothing behavior? All right, so when you were doing the self-care scan, hello. When you were doing the self-care inventory, I had you take a deep breath and a deep breath out. The parasympathetic functions best when it gets the message from the breath that it doesn't have to fight, it doesn't have to flee, it doesn't have to freeze. What was happening with Vietnam vets, and what continues to happen in trauma, is that a person goes into a trauma remembrance and then they freeze in that. And there's a word called dissociation. People learn how to dissociate from that memory by going into another place within themselves. They become disconnected from themselves. So there are various ways of soothing ourselves, like the breathing that I was mentioning. Now I'm going to mention two others that are woo-woo, so just know that, okay? These are woo-woo, and it's now been a part of probably 10 years of treatment for dealing with anxiety and the flight, freeze, fear, all that thing. And one is tapping. Has anybody besides one in here know what tapping is? Okay. All right. Because when people were coming back from other wars past Vietnam, and it was discovered that the treatment they were getting wasn't helping them, and we were learning more and more about the brain, we in the Western culture decided that we might just look a little bit at Eastern medicine and make a holistic approach to treatment. So what has developed over the last 15 years is doing tapping to self-calm. And I'm going to talk to you about what that is for a moment so you understand what it is. With the help of understanding Eastern medicine, we learned about the acupuncture points. Does anybody know about acupuncture? Do you know what that is? Okay, there are acupuncture points that are very sensitive that cause the parasympathetic nervous system to go into place, to begin, because of tapping, because the most important acupuncture points are tapped. So, by tapping those acupuncture points, by doing the tapping, you are invigorating the nerves that are in these parts of the body to calm down. They are giving attention to calm down and to breathe. That's called tapping. And one of the reasons I tell you about it is because I think it's good for me and maybe good for you. But there's a possibility that your daughter is going to call and tell you that your grandchild has been to XYZ doctor and they taught them how to do tapping. And the last thing in the world is you need to say anything, first of all, about arguing with what the doctor told them to do. Or saying that's not of God. That wouldn't go over very well either. Because we are now learning that doing the physical tapping prompts the body to relax. And then the other tapping that tapping brings more energy to the heart and to the lungs because the nerves that are located in these areas go to those organs and give them energy. So I suggest it's not going to hurt you. And it's being prescribed now by educated psychiatrists and doctors, it's not going to hurt you if you just tap every day. But I would add it to your devotional time. So for me, Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God, Spirit of the living God. And just letting God fill me. It's not hurting me at all. And we are then participating in new scientific research about how the brain can be stimulated to relax. So now with the Vietnam vets or the people coming back from Afghanistan or Iran, Iraq, wherever they've been, it's not just giving medicine, it's giving information that helps them feel that they can participate in their healing. Okay, so one more woo-woo. The other bit of new, like 15 years, perhaps, of research has taught us about EMDR. Can you tell me EMDR, what it's Okay, I've got it on the paper, okay. Emotional desensitization, okay, response, okay. So, and this will just be even more woo to you, all right? So just know, I'm going to become a community witch. Okay, so EMDR, they have found that there is a cord connecting the left and right brains called the corpus callosum. I'm sure you've heard that. There is a cord connecting the left and right brains called the corpus callosum. And we have discovered through science, through medicine, that creating a relaxation response between the two sides, left and right, relaxes and puts the parasympathetic system in place. So your grandchild may call and say, Grandma, guess what we did today? I sat and I did a EMDR session. Well, what's that? All she did was sit in front of my eyes and have my eye, and I just followed her finger. They have discovered that by doing that, it relaxes the system. So now what we've got going is that we're using science for medicine and we're using science for self-care. And people are using these things at home, and one of the values of that is that they feel that they're participating in their own health. They're not just taking a pill, but instead they're using these new ways of working for helping themselves. And there's something about feeling what would it be? Self-helped, something, where they're doing it for themselves, that they feel more involved in their care. It's not just like this outside person is telling them what to do, but there's a participatory relationship. We can talk about that later if you want to. The brain needs protection. We are the ones who make decisions for our own body to be safe. We set emotional boundaries. We protect ourselves from people who act in ways that are not healthy for us. We don't listen to ideas that are inconsistent with our own values. We are reminded every day about the threat of the world, and we make a decision to not concentrate on it all day long. We have to decide how much to know. We have to decide on how much to know so that we get enough that we know we can manage what we know. But if we find that we're not managing it and it's creating anxiety, then we have to lessen it. We have to use our own ways of determining what's good for us. There's another chemical called oxytocin, and it's produced in the brain when you get a cuddle, when you get a hug, with sexual intimacy. Oxytocin really is good for our brains. It makes our brains really healthy. It can be that we use other ways of feeding our brain through alcohol, through drugs, through binging on food or binging on Netflix that is not a response of calming the brain. Instead, it's the easiest thing to do. There's another thing that's pretty simple, but it takes a tremendous amount of discipline, and that's wearing sunscreen. After we drink that entire bottle of water in the bathroom and we take our shower, we really need to put on sunscreen. We really need to put on that needs to be one of our first behaviors, is to wear sunscreen. Now, that is not something I like to do, wearing sunscreen. And then finally, the brain needs silence. It needs silence to heal. And we can quiet ourselves with walking, enjoying nature, breathing deeply in meditation, sitting with a poem or a scripture. Our brain needs silence. We need to be quieting ourselves and not counting on other things to quiet ourselves. We need quiet. So, the superpower of all the wisdom keepers here is that you have self-awareness. You connect with yourself. You know what you're doing that's good for you, and you know what you're doing that's not really good for you. You're a wisdom keeper, and what we do when we gather is we just collect more wisdom. From all the resources of the people that are at this place, there are a ton of wisdom keepers here, and we just add to each other's wisdom. We help ourselves to identify stressors through our insight. And wisdom keepers learn to know about the deep pause of good health. What does that mean? That means taking a deep breath, and at the top of that breath, pausing, and then taking a breath out. Wisdom keepers know the deep breath. So we're going to do that breath again before you leave. I want to know what your thoughts are, reactions are. Bill will hold the microphone, and let's just see if there's anything I've bothered you with today.
I have the microphone, and since you talked about dreams, I dream all the time, and a lot of them are horrible dreams. They wake me up, and then I can't get back to sleep. I don't know what to do about that.
So, knowing you a little, you have reason to have some hard dreams, difficult dreams, knowing you a little. But there's something about writing those dreams in a notebook beside your bed when you have it, and they're put somewhere else, because it's sort of like a little child. I don't know if you had this experience, but I would be in the kitchen cooking, and one of my children would come in, "Mommy, read me a book, read me a book, read me a book." I can't right now, I have to kick, "Mommy, read me a book, read me a book, read me a book." Okay, look at the clock. When the big hand gets to the 12, I will read you a book. So the child, my child, would go in, come back, look at the clock, come back, and would calm down, because I had been trustworthy that when it got to the 12, I did stop cooking and read the book. Okay, it's the same idea. There's something in you that's trying to get your attention so hard, and all you're trying to do is either ignore it or push it aside. If you can create a journal full of those, it might be interesting to see if any of that changes, because you haven't gotten the message of the dream. All you've done is just tried to get through it and fall back to sleep. So put it in your journal. For some reason, the dreams, they do not want to be ignored, just like my child didn't want to be ignored. But if you can figure out a way that you're not ignoring it and you'll pay attention to it sometime, then it will quiet down. Does that make sense? Yeah, we'll ask you if you got a journal by the time we meet again, Bill. Anybody else want to make a comment to anything that's been talked about?
So I assume you would recommend yoga, is that correct?
I would recommend yoga, but it's not for everybody. But yes, of course, I would recommend yoga. Yoga is quieting, but it also does that lubricating of the joints. It really helps the lubrication of the joints.
Is it normal to constantly count forwards and backwards every time you stop anything, your brain is stopped? I count forwards, I count backwards, and I can go into 100 or 1,000 counts.
So you just keep counting when your brain is not occupied?
Myself allowed to count. I go to church on Sunday, I count everybody in there, and I can tell you how many's in the early service and how many's.
Oh, really?
I constantly count. And this is something I never did when George was alive.
Well, you sound a little bored. So you got to do something so you count how many's there. Well, there are 35 in this service and 25 in that service, and I don't know. It could be a boredom response. Right. No, the it just keeps your brain active. Okay, that's one of the possibilities. Anybody else? Okay, we are going to get today, before we finish, we're going to get into small groups of 4. So I need for you, and I promise you it will not be long. I will get you out of here, but you see, we had to stay till there was no more potential for rain. So would you please get in a group of 4? Just pull the chairs are heavy, I realize, but just make it happen. Just turn around or whatever. And on your sheet, I'm asking you a question. And 2 people could just be here. Okay, good, you got it. Yeah, we need just groups, small groups. The final question for today is, how does being mindful by bringing this conversation into the community help our community? It's at the bottom of your paper. How does being mindful by bringing this conversation into the community, how does it help our community? I'll give you 2 more minutes. So begin winding up, please. Okay, I'd like your attention, please. So, just for a moment or two, I'm going to have Bill pass the mic to anybody who would like to share what your group talked about. Is anybody willing to talk about that? The question was, how does being mindful by bringing this conversation into the community, how does it help our community? Go ahead.
Carol was talking about earlier in her life, or late, not here, she was into meditation and how that helped to center her, bring her into an awareness of her body and her brain and everything. So I said, maybe we can look into starting a small meditation group. Doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be a lot of people, just to be calming. And I would like to recommend the chair yoga on Fridays. It's not totally meditation, but it brings you a wonderful body awareness. And you're in a chair. You don't have to stand up and do stuff if you don't want to or are not able to. So 10 o'clock on Fridays is chair yoga in the game room. And I was saying that it brings me a body awareness and makes me aware of tension in my body that I didn't even know was there. And so when I leave, I'm like in a much better place. 10 o'clock Friday, chair yoga, game room.
Thank you.
About Tai Chi and have practiced at various regimens for many years. I think there is healing energy all around us, and Tai Chi helps you harness that energy and direct it and pass it to, I try to pass it to people I know who need healing or just well-being.
I want to speak to Tai Chi for a minute. A real miracle happened for a couple of days. Paul's wife, Judy, was quite a Tai Chi person, and she did 104 postures in Tai Chi 3 times a week at her office. And so I heard about it. Oh, this huge bird's sitting on a tree over there. I heard about it, and I said, Paul, Judy, could we see whether you could come over and just sit in the park on Sunday mornings at 8:30 and just watch? So finally, she did it, and Paul was kind enough to drive the car over, got the wheelchair. She sat and watched the Tai Chi, and then she got up with her walker, and Paul stood beside her, and her body remembered some of the movements. It was so beautiful. She was just with us for 3 weeks, but it was so beautiful that the body knew how to do it. You know, Judy was not all there and slowly wasn't there, but her body was able to do Tai Chi with us. It was just beautiful. Paul, I just want to thank you for that extra effort, because it meant he had to get her up at 8 o'clock and help her get dressed and get in the car and come over. But it was such a blessing to see. Anyone else? What about your small group? What did you talk about? Well, thank you for having small groups and thank you for talking. So I want to end today with the superpower of the wisdom keepers, and I just want to do one more thing with you as you leave. You to practice the pause. So put your feet on the floor. Just get your feet flat on the floor and close your eyes. And I'm going to be asking you to regulate your breath as you're being quiet. And I'd like you to bring your breath in and up to the top, and then I want you to pause. And then I want you to bring it back down into your belly. Do that 3 times. And when you're done, slowly open your eyes. My conjecture for today is if we feel confident with the pause, if we feel how the pause feels, there will be an ultimate pause in our life. There will be a time when the breath doesn't go back out. There will be a time when we have our own personal pause. And if we do this exercise, we may find more peace with the final pause. So you might consider, before you eat with your prayer or whatever it is you do, you just do the breath with the pause, and then you breathe out. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you were here. We'll meet one more time at the end of July. Thank you for being here.